Gavel in hand, Iowa Senator Charles Grassley now chairing the United States Senate Judiciary Committee, with majority Republicans leading the Senate. A conversation with Senator Grassley on this edition of Iowa Press.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation.
I'm a dad.
I am a mom.
I'm a kid.
I'm a kid at heart. I'm a banker.
I'm an Iowa banker.
No matter who you are, there is an Iowa banker who is ready to help you get where you want to go. Iowa Bankers, allowing you to discover the genuine difference of Iowa banks.
The University of Iowa is dedicated to educating Iowa students, teaching Iowa children, keeping Iowa healthy, enriching Iowa lives, building Iowa businesses, training Iowa leaders. The University for Iowa.
Iowa Community Foundations, an initiative of the Iowa Council of Foundations, connecting donors to the causes and communities they care about, for good, for Iowa, forever. Details at iowacommunityfoundations.org. The Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure. Iowa Communications Network. The ICN is committed to the enhancements of distance learning and continues to meet the demands for greater access of high-speed internet by educational users. For decades, Iowa Press has brought you politicians and newsmakers from across Iowa and beyond. Now celebrating more than 40 years of broadcast excellence on statewide Iowa Public Television. This is the Friday, April 3 edition of Iowa Press. Here is Dean Borg.
A year and a half ago, Senator Charles Grassley, seated where he is right now here at the Iowa Press table, lighted the political horizon by saying he'll run for a 7th term. A few months before that, Democratic Senator Tom Harkin said he was not running. So Senator Grassley, deciding he did not want Iowa to have 2 new senators, giving up decades of seniority and the power that comes with it, and more power. Last November's election giving Republicans the Senate's majority, and the Judiciary Committee gavel to Iowa's senior senator. Welcome back, Senator Grassley.
I'm always glad to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
And you know the 2 journalists across the table, but I need to introduce them to our television audience. Des Moines Register political columnist Kathy Obradovich and Radio Iowa News Director Kay Henderson.
Senator, there's been an announced framework for a deal with Iran regarding its nuclear capabilities. What are your thoughts? Is that a thumbs up or a thumbs down from you to that?
If we can have a disarmament agreement with Iran like we had over decades with Russia, I would very much applaud it. It's a framework. I would want to wait until June 30th and beyond that to study what the details are. I think it'd be foolish to make a judgment right now. But I hope that the President will send it to the United States Senate for consideration. And there's a bill that's the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee said that he was going to bring up on April the 14th that would say that the President must submit it to the Congress. I'm going to vote for that. I would think that the President would want to submit it to the Congress so that it kind of seals the deal not only for the President but also the people of the United States being behind it if it gets the approval of the Congress.
Ted Cruz in Iowa this week denounced the deal, said the Obama administration does not know with whom they're dealing in regards to the Iranian regime. You're a little reticent to give it a thumbs down at this point?
I think until you read, just like you ought to read a bill before you vote for it, I think you ought to read for a document before you comment on it. I can say that I'm skeptical, not based upon just the last 18 months of negotiation, but also based upon going back to the Bush administration, that there were so many times that the Iranian government promised to deliver certain things and certain agreements were to be reached, and they backed off. So you can understand why I'm skeptical. But I'm still going to wait until I see the document. But I think I have every reason to be skeptical, and I want to emphasize I'm very skeptical.
Do you think that any sort of agreement could be actually enforced and that the Iranians are not going to cheat or that the United States would be able to catch them if they did?
Well, one thing that happened over the week on these negotiations is that they didn't want on-the-spot inspection, and if they're going to refuse on-the-spot inspection, then I think that that's more reason for me to say yes to your question, that I'm skeptical.
Yeah. Well, coming back closer to home, a lot of people were skeptical about the religious freedom law in Indiana. And I'm curious whether you think that Governor Pence in Indiana made the situation worse by the way he talked about the religious freedom law and subsequently asking for an amendment that specified there wouldn't be business discrimination.
I bet that I should leave to my vote in 1993, voting for the federal law of the same spirit, to make sure that government doesn't tread on religion, which would be backing up the First Amendment. I voted for that. A Democrat president spoke highly of it before he signed it. And I think that if the Supreme Court had not ruled in '98 that federal law was not applicable to states, you wouldn't have a whole bunch of states going out now trying to do it. I don't think I want to second guess what they might do there, but I know very firmly, and both in the spirit of the '93 law as well as the spirit of the Constitution, that discrimination is against our Constitution and against our law.
With that in mind, and in what has happened since the time you voted for that, would you vote for the same legislation again? Would you vote
as
yes?
of now, I don't have any reason not to vote for it, because it passed by such an overwhelming margin, a bipartisan margin,
yeah.
And I haven't heard criticism of the federal law in the same way you
So
hear.
you don't regret that vote?
No,
okay.
the same way that I would think that it bans discrimination, and the laws ban discrimination. And discrimination is not only contrary to our Constitution, but is contrary to the civility of America.
The way the discussion has unfolded in Indiana, however, it has become a battleground over whether you have religious freedom or you have discrimination. That line has been drawn in the discussion about this law in Indiana. Does that hurt Republican presidential candidates who have jumped on board with this Religious Freedom Act and now are in the position of having to defend themselves against charges of being discriminatory?
If we had one or two candidates, I think I could answer your question, but I think that you have to get back to I'll take off on one of the words you use, that I think both the liberal and the conservatives are taking advantage of this to promote their agenda, and that's sad when we ought to be looking at the spirit of the law. But you get back to something that's very basic. Discrimination is contrary to our Constitution and the laws.
What should happen if a business owner has a religious objection to providing photography or catering services to a same-sex couple getting married?
Well, that would be the same way that we've had a lot of cases of interstate commerce. The federal statutes and constitutional amendments guarantee access.
You said both liberals and conservatives taking
have.
advantage of the current furor.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Well, so all of a sudden, everything's talked about Iran, everything's talked about a budget deficit, this or that in Washington. Both the left and the right hasn't had an opportunity to talk about the social issues they're so interested in. This has given both conservatives and liberals an opportunity to approach their side of the coin and take advantage of it. And that's what I see happening.
Is it a mistake, you think, by Republican conservatives to have taken advantage of it?
Well, I think the left's taken advantage of it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have been chair of the Judiciary Committee for the past few months since Republicans took control. You announced that one of your goals was to redo civil forfeiture laws,
Yes.
whereby the Internal Revenue Service seizes cash assets from people if they suspect there's criminal activity. There's now reports of this being abused on the part of law enforcement and police. Do you intend to address civil forfeiture in a broad way at the federal level?
Not only in a broad way, but also in a bipartisan way. I think it'll be easy for us to get a bipartisan solution. We don't have a bill worked out yet. There are different bills in, but not one that I feel that we can bring before the committee that will get a broad consensus, but we have the ability to do it. And particularly, we want to zero in on forfeiture that before it's got to be connected with a crime, at least before it takes place. But also, everybody's considered innocent until proven guilty. It ought to be an opportunity to overturn a Supreme Court case that said somebody couldn't use their own property to defend themselves because it was forfeited. We also have an instance in which people that didn't have a crime had things taken away from them. It took just a massive amount of money to get it back. And you shouldn't have to do that, particularly if you aren't involved in a crime. But everybody's entitled to due process.
You mentioned when you were taking over as Judiciary Chair that you were particularly concerned about forfeiture by the IRS. My paper, of course, you've probably seen, has done a lot of reporting dealing with forfeiture at the local law enforcement level. Do you feel like anything that you would do for Congress could actually deal with the local law enforcement issue, or is that something the state is going to have to do?
Well, we'll only deal with it as far as federal law and federal crime is concerned. We'll have to leave it up to the individual states to do that. But don't forget, I've already sent 2 letters to the Attorney General, and he's backed off on some of the federal use of it in areas, but we're still going to have to legislate. And I think your question points out that there is some balance, because forfeiture or the threat of it is some help to law enforcement. But on the other hand, I think it's been abused.
Senator, one of your other goals when you were taking over as Judiciary Chairman dealt with getting a new Attorney General. Oh. And of course, with Loretta Lynch not being confirmed, are you comfortable with having Eric Holder continue to serve out the rest of President Obama's term, or is there something else that's going to happen?
I suppose you'd say, as long as I'm voting against Loretta Lynch, that I would want him to serve. No, I'd rather have her serve. But the point is,
you'd rather have her serve, but you voted against her.
Well, she's fully qualified, so you want me to explain why I voted the way I did. I'm looking for somebody that's going to depoliticize the Justice Department. The Attorney General himself used these words: "I'm a wingman for the President." The Attorney General is supposed to be a lawyer for the entire people, not Republican or Democrat or Independent. And she indicated in her questions to us that she agrees with the President on certain unconstitutional things he's done. She hasn't tended to disagree with the way Holders run the department. And I want somebody to make a change, and she isn't going to make the change. And
is that too much to ask, considering that it'll be President Obama who appoints the next Attorney General? Well, let me say this. I had a telephone, I hate to quote the President, but I think it fits in here. He said it, he talked to me on the phone about Loretta Lynch 3 or 4 times, and he says, "You don't expect me to appoint somebody that disagrees with me." Well, no, I guess I wouldn't, but that still doesn't mean that he's a wingman for the President. He's an Attorney General for all the people in the United States, and the Justice Department should not be seen as an adjunct of the White House. But you're not willing to appoint somebody new, even though the person who is in the office is somebody that you don't agree with? Well, listen, we got to get it to a vote first, and then I think your question's appropriate. But let me make very clear: the President called me when he sent her name up. The Democrat leader of the committee asked me when I was going to have the hearing. I said January 27th. I had it on January 27th. I said when we were going to do it in committee. We did it in committee on the day I said we were going to get it done. And now it's out on the floor, and it's McConnell's call when it's going to come up. Is it possible and it's going to come up right after the human trafficking bill. Is it possible that you'll vote for her on the floor, even though you didn't vote for her to come out of committee? No.
Senator Grassley, I move on to the Iowa caucuses here. There's been quite a lot of emphasis over the years on ethanol, and it seems to be sort of a litmus test for candidates coming into Iowa. Would you say that candidates who don't support ethanol and its blending into fuels nationwide in the renewable fuel standard need not even campaign in Iowa?
No, we should have everybody come to Iowa. We can get to come to Iowa to campaign. It's a wonderful opportunity for people to try to be president, and I'm disappointed if they wouldn't support ethanol, but it's not a litmus test for me. But understand, almost everybody's going to be called to their opinion on it, because there's $2 or $3 million coming into our state that's going to promote that issue and force people to tell where they stand.
You and Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, who is an all but announced candidate for the presidency, are co-sponsoring a bill about ethanol, E15 in particular. Do you think that will truly make a difference in consumer availability of E15?
Yes, because the EPA has not ruled on certain leeways for using E15. So during the summer months, and only during the summer months, it's going to stop the use of E15 until they make their decision.
What's your feeling about how long it's going to take for the Obama administration to actually make a decision on the renewable fuel standard? Is this something that we're going to continue to wait indefinitely, or into next year, after the next election, or what's going to happen there?
Well, they said they're going to do it this summer. I hope so. I think 29 to 33 of us, I don't know the exact number, wrote a letter asking them to speed up. You know, they started in 13 and they were going to do it for 14, but they never did it for 14. Now they're going to do it for 14, 15, and 16. Just do it. But if they cut back from the 14 and 4/10 billion gallons that the law now requires that oil companies mix with gasoline, it's going to hurt the advancement of ethanol, and particularly two areas, one E15 and the other one cellulosic ethanol.
What do you think the holdup is? Is it just political?
I think big oil has a big lever within EPA, which surprises me, being it's a Democrat administration, but I think they have great influence there.
Senator, this past week you kicked off your campaign with a private fundraiser. As you make your case to Iowans for re-election, what is the succinct one-sentence explanation you'll present as the reason you should be re-elected?
I'm one of the few members of Congress that does administrative oversight of the executive branch of government. And if every senator did that, I couldn't use this as a reason for running re-election. But I believe in the checks and balances of government. And I believe that we not only pass laws, but we have a responsibility to see that they're faithfully executed. And I think I have a good reputation in that area, being an equal opportunity one against both Republican and Democrat presidents. And I think we have to do more of it, and I set the pattern for that. Now, to the people of Iowa, oversight might not mean anything to them, but if they study checks and balances in government, they know exactly how important that is.
Is there anything specific that you would hope to accomplish in a seventh term that maybe has eluded you over the past 6 terms?
A constitutional amendment requiring a balanced budget in the federal constitution, like we have in 46 states and like we have in Iowa.
And why is that the top priority?
Because of the deficit situation and the lack of discipline on Congress on spending. Now, we reinstituted some discipline this week. The 1974 budget law says that you have to have a budget every year, and Reed hasn't had a budget for the last 5 years, so we did pass a budget, and that's some discipline, but nothing's going to do like what we do here in Iowa, where the legislature has to balance a budget.
In 2016, Iowans will be asked to vote in a U.S. Senate race. They'll also be casting their attention to a presidential race. In 1988 and 1996, you enthusiastically endorsed and campaigned for Bob Dole. You have been reticent to do that again. What are your intentions regarding the presidential field among Republicans in 2016? Do you plan to endorse someone?
No.
Why not?
I think that I'm a candidate myself, and I think I have a responsibility to respect all views within the Republican Party, and I think that would single me out of whatever the philosophy of whoever I would endorse, that was more my orientation than looking for the broad interests of the Republican Party.
So that's more the reason that you wouldn't endorse, is because you're a candidate in 2016.
Yeah, but you also got to remember my pattern has, except for the Bob Dole, and then very late, I did endorse in 2000 George W. Bush, but I've stayed out of them, so I think it's more the tradition that you ought to hold me that is the reason for doing it than just the fact I'm up for election.
Governor Branstad has been neutral the last few cycles, but he's made his position clear that he thinks the next president ought to be a governor, as opposed to being a former senator or some other office or coming from business. Are there preferences like that you would be imposing on the next presidential field without perhaps endorsing somebody in particular?
I'm going to answer your question, but I have to preface it with the fact that I don't intend this statement to be a denigration of the qualities or qualifications of any of my colleagues in the Congress, but I approach it from this standpoint, that the grassroots of America tends to be so anti-Washington and more anti-Congress, and also the experience of Senator Obama not serving in the Congress so long. I think we have a better chance of if it's a governor.
Really?
But you know, the voters are going to make this choice, and that's what I like about the Iowa caucuses. The cream is going to come to the surface.
Voters made choices in 2014, and they sent some new members to the Congress representing Iowa. One of them, your protege, David Young, Rod Blum from the 1st District, both Republicans, and you have a new colleague in the United States Senate. What has been your advice to them in terms of getting their feet wet in Congress?
I think the best advice I can give them is a little bit political. Don't take anything for granted. This is the first day of the rest of the campaign. Beyond that, though, what do you do to get ready for the next campaign? Be the very best senator or congressman you can be, and if you do that and you work hard at it, and people know you work hard, not only work hard in Washington, but work hard back in your constituents, and you care what people think, and you have face-to-face meetings with your constituents, that's also very, very important for not only for doing the job you're paid to do, but for advancement.
Rod Blum has this week formed what he calls a term limit caucus in the House. What are your thoughts on that as someone who's not exactly a poster child for term limits?
I voted for term limits in 1997, and if it came up again, I'd vote for it.
But you yourself are not adhering to personal term limits.
Do you think that Iowa ought to be put at a disadvantage to the other 50 states? I think we ought to have a rule that is nationwide so all states are treated equally.
Senator, Governor Branstad has been grooming Lieutenant Governor Kim Reynolds as his successor should he ever decide to retire from being governor, which is by no means a foregone conclusion. Are you grooming anyone to try to run if and when you decide to retire? I've heard your grandson's name, Pat Grassley, as being possibly a successor to you. Is there anybody like that you would look to take your place in the Senate?
No.
No? Nobody at all? Not even your grandson?
Well, if my grandson wanted to run for the Senate, but if he wants to run for the Senate, he ought to start talking about it.
Why not? Why not groom somebody?
I think it's an insult to the people of Iowa, and whoever I was trying to groom probably be somebody that's no more qualified than a lot of other people that want to run.
I just remember that last week on this program, the state Democratic chairwoman, Andy McGuire, made a comment about, and we were asking her about who's going to run against Senator Grassley. Are you going to give him a pass? We said. Who do you must have some intelligence feelers out. Who do you think might be an opponent that you're gearing up for?
There's nobody on the radar screen that I've heard of. There's one Democrat announced, and that's all I know at this point.
Right.
Senator, speaking of what's on the radar screen, you, as the chair of the Judiciary Committee, would be in charge of managing a nominee for the U.S. Supreme Court should there be a vacancy. What are you hearing in that regard? Do you think that Obama will serve out the rest of his term with the current state of affairs on the U.S. Supreme Court, or are you anticipating a confirmation battle?
I only hear what you journalists report about Justice Ginsburg. I don't know anything else. I don't hear anything, rumors, anything. If I did, my ears would perk up. I hope that we don't have a vacancy, and I think maybe Justice Ginsburg's attitude is that she doesn't like people trying to push her off the bench.
How do you think Republicans in the Senate are going to be able to work with Chuck Schumer as the new Democratic leader? And is that going to change the dynamic in how the two parties work together in the Senate?
There's some indication that Chuck Schumer wants to work in a little more bipartisan way than Reed did. I don't have evidence of that because even though he's on my committee, a couple committees I'm on, I don't work that closely with him, but that's what I felt. Like, for instance, he would be very much on the edge of this, but we had a hard time stopping 600 amendments for being adopted that were filed against the budget. And so McConnell took us all in and see what can we do to get these down. And it was reported that Senator Schumer sent word in that he was willing to have only 3 more Democrat votes amendments voted on. Then that got 3 Republican amendments. And we got down from several dozen that were possible votes down to just 6. So that's just one example.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you. We're coming up to the end of the program here, and I just want to thank you for consistently being a willing guest on Iowa Press over the years. It's always been good to have you here, especially on this Easter and Passover weekend. And you might put in a good word for us with your colleague Joni Ernst, too. We've invited her several times to be here, and you might tell her that you enjoy being here if you do.
Yeah. I'll be glad to do that. You
All
bet.
right.
Yeah. I'll bet you it's just a case of her waiting a while. She doesn't even have an office yet. She's got a cubby hole up on the 8th floor and she's going to be able to pick her office on April the 20th, but she's not able to move in until June. She doesn't even have a full staff yet. So give her some leeway.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Grassley.
Yeah.
And we'll be back next week with another edition of Iowa Press, and that time with former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley. He's exploring a potential campaign for the Democratic presidential nomination. Governor O'Malley on Iowa Press next week, same time, 7:30 Friday night, noon on Sunday. I'm Dean Borg, and thanks for joining us today.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation,
I'm a veteran.
I'm a builder.
I'm a volunteer.
I am a teacher.
I'm a banker.
I'm an Iowa banker.
No matter who you are, there is an Iowa banker who is ready to help you get where you want to go. Iowa Bankers, allowing you to discover the genuine difference of Iowa banks.
The University of Iowa is dedicated to educating Iowa students, teaching Iowa children, keeping Iowa healthy, enriching Iowa lives, building Iowa businesses, training Iowa leaders. The University for Iowa.
Iowa Community Foundations, an initiative of the Iowa Council of Foundations, connecting donors to the causes and communities they care about, for good, for Iowa, forever. Details at iowacommunityfoundations.org. The Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure. Iowa Communications Network. The ICN supplies authorized users with dedicated internet and data connections to enhance their mission of protecting the citizens of Iowa with a private and secure statewide fiber optic network.